The void between realities had always been silent, untouched by time or motion. But today, it shimmered with tension, not the tension of war, not even the tension of paradox, but of ideas. An abstraction so grand, only to beings in existence, could truly manifest it. The Beyonder hovered above the rippling membrane of the Marvel multiverse, his presence distorting entire layers of dimensional space. His essence was not merely within reality, he was pressing against it from the outside. Not a part of the grand cosmic order, but the observer, the unknowable other. His eyes, if one could call them, that reflected no stars, only potential, limitless. In him existed the very concept of the unquantifiable, the Marvel multiverse with its living tribunals. Celestials and countless pantheons had once quivered at his mere contemplation of intervention. He had not taken a seat at the table of gods. He had flipped the table over and asked if the table had ever mattered to begin with. But today, he wasn't gazing inward. He was staring across the threshold through fiction, through metastructure, through boundaries that no cosmic being was meant to pierce, and on the other side, he saw something curious. A man, blue and glowing, sat amidst the threads of DC's timeline. His mind was fractured across the concept of when, but stable within the concept of what. He was a scientist, once John Osterman, but had become more than that. Dr. Manhattan wasn't a god born of belief, nor a cosmic ruler forged. In fire, he was something more insidious, a man who had seen the mechanisms of the universe exposed and could not forget the machinery behind it. The Beyonder had seen him alter timelines with casual waves of his hand. He had watched him unmake legacies, erase generations of heroes, shift destinies like a child rearranging dominoes. And yet, in all of Manhattan's actions, there was not joy, not curiosity, only detachment. That intrigued the Beyonder. The fabric of the Omniverse, the larger tapestry housing both Marvel and DC constructs, twitched. Subtly as the Beyonder stepped across the membrane. The act alone cracked the laws of narrative sovereignty. Writers would later call it metaphor. Readers would call it fan fiction. But to the Beyonder, it was a simple question made manifest. What happens when the unknowable meets the indifferent? Doctor, Manhattan looked up. He was constructing a solar system from memory, meticulously realigning planets and tweaking their gravities. He didn't stop when the Beyonder approached. But his voice echoed before his lips moved. You aren't part of this continuity. The Beyonder's voice was not sound, but thought, reverberating in the deepest core of existential identity. Continuity is a constraint applied by those who cannot comprehend the whole. You rearrange timelines like furniture, yet you think. In terms of boundaries, I see everything, Manhattan replied, now standing on the core of a sun that hadn't yet been born. Every beginning, every end, nothing surprises me anymore. The Beyonder almost smiled. Then let me be the exception. The moment was still, but it was not quiet. Ideas clashed beneath their words like subatomic storms. Manhattan tilted. His head, you seek conflict? No, said the Beyonder, I seek understanding. I seek the question that even omniscience cannot answer. You believe you are that question? I am beyond belief. I was the observer before your fiction gained form. I was the yearning that existed before the first panel was drawn. Manhattan's glowing pupils narrowed. You speak as if you were the author? No, the Beyonder answered. But I have met him, and I have considered what exists beyond even him. Manhattan paused. There is nothing beyond the author. The Beyonder surged forward. Not in motion, but in presences. Essence folding through probabilities and metaphysical strata until he stood inches from Manhattan's consciousness. That's where you're wrong, John. You believe in determinism because you are still bound to time. You perceive causality as a straight line, even though you live outside of it. But I exist in a realm where the line, the writer, the reader, the ink, even the concept of story itself are merely artifacts of thought. Manhattan considered this, but his emotion was unreadable. That makes you dangerous. The Beyonder's form darkened, almost eclipsed by the weight of his own existential magnitude. No, that makes me inevitable. For a moment, the universes seemed to recoil. Marvel's cosmic hierarchy trembled, and the source wall in DC's. Plane whispered with unease. The presence of both beings was rewriting rules not meant to coexist. The tension between them was no longer philosophical, it was physical. Atoms danced out of rhythm, time slowed, language broke down, Existence was watching, and the question, the true question, was blooming like a black lotus between them. If Dr. Manhattan stood for perfect detachment, logic evolved beyond emotion then. The Beyonder stood for the will to reshape everything based on desire. One was the acceptance of inevitability, the other, the rebellion against it. I have watched you manipulate the strands of destiny, said the Beyonder, but you never act, you never impose your will. You see all things, but do nothing. There is no point to interference. All paths lead to entropy, but not if you rewrite the path, Beyonder countered. You could be more, but you choose not to be. That is your failure. Manhattan stepped forward now, the star beneath him flaring, collapsing, reforming. You are reckless. You treat existence like clay, yet ask no permission. There is no permission. Beyonder said coldly. There is only potential and the courage to shape it. The words had reached a frequency no mortal could hear. Philosophies were colliding like celestial bodies, detachment versus will, observation versus transformation. You seek to win a debate, Manhattan said. But I see the end already. I am the end, said the Beyonder, his voice final, and the beginning. And with that, the final spark ignited between them. The stage was set not just for a battle of power, but of meaning for the Beyonder. To win meant proving that even infinite observation bode the will. For Manhattan, to win meant reaffirming that change without understanding was mere chaos. Neither would yield, neither would retreat. The multiverse was about to bear witness not to a fight of fists or lasers, but of fundamental truths. The confrontation would not just scar realities, it would test the very idea of reality, and only. One of them would emerge as the greater concept. The moment the confrontation began, the stars wept, time unraveled, not in the way mortals imagined with clocks and calendars falling into disarray, but in the fundamental breakdown of sequence itself. The before and the after clashed into a singular now, and in that now, to beings that should never coexist, to narrative ruptures prepared to redefine existence. Dr. Manhattan lifted a hand, not in threat, but in acknowledgement. The cosmos responded, particles twisted into alignment, echoing his desire before he even spoke it. He didn't raise his voice. There was no need. Around him, galaxies bent, like rivers redirecting their current. But even in this silent storm of power, he waited. The Beyonder moved not through space, but through conceptual presence. He didn't teleport. He simply was now somewhere else. In one instant, he stood at the edge of what Manhattan had sculpted. And in the next, he was the edge, the constructs. Manhattan formed crumbled at his rival, not because of force, but because the Beyonder's nature rejected limitation. Dr. Manhattan raised an eyebrow. You defy causality. The Beyonder replied without moving his mouth, I am the rejection of causality. You function within the equation, John. I am the hand that erases the equation. There was no warning shot. There was no escalation. The battle erupted in an instant, not with sound or fury, but with existential collapse. All of fiction felt. The tremor, Dr. Manhattan's body dispersed into quanta and reassembled within a blink across dimensions, replicating himself into countless forms across probability branches. Each form began to alter the very foundation of the reality they occupied, rewriting gravitational constants, inverting laws of entropy, freezing time, and displacing existence. He converted space itself into quantum code and sent cascading waves of molecular implosions directly at the Beyonder. But the Beyonder did not respond in kind. He didn't need to. The quantum code rewrote itself mid-transmission. The laws that Dr. Manhattan invoked were denied access to the reality they attempted to enter. Beyonder had edited the meta framework of the battle. These were no longer Manhattan's universes to manipulate. The multiversal script itself had been revised. Dr. Manhattan blinked. You're tampering with the narrative. I am the narrative. The Beyonder answered. This isn't a universe. It's an idea, and I am its conclusion, unwilling to accept defeat in theory. Manhattan did what few had seen him do. He acted with emotion. His consciousness flared like a thousand suns in pain. With a thunderous focus, he compressed infinite versions of himself into one perfect form, collapsing every possibility into a singular, omnipotent vessel. This was no longer the detached God. This was the totality of all potential John Ostermans. condensed into one definitive expression. He spoke, and the words weren't words, they were laws. Let there be stillness. Across the battlefield, creation halted. Energy froze, time went numb. Concepts like movement, force, and will were unmade. It was as if Manhattan had disconnected the simulation, flipping the switch that held everything in motion. And for a brief, impossible instant, the Beyonder ceased, not defeated, not erased. He simply paused. The moment hung like the silence after a scream. For anyone else, this would have been victory. For the first time, the Beyonder had been locked in place, caught within an anti-concept existence without change. Dr. Manhattan stepped forward slowly, his body illuminating the void. He reached out, not to destroy, but to finally understand. This thing that should not be. But just as his fingertips reached the Beyonder's frozen form, something cracked. It wasn't the fabric of space. It wasn't the laws of matter. It was narrative consistency itself. The stillness unraveled. Not from within, but from outside, the Beyonder moved not through will, but by being. His essence reasserted itself because he was not part of this system. Manhattan's command over reality worked inside stories, but the Beyonder existed before the story. He was the reader becoming the page. He was the page realizing it was never. Bound by the spine, the Beyonder breathed, and in that breath, the stillness shattered. Dr. Manhattan was sent spiraling across multiple meter layers of existence, not just through time or space, but through perspective shifts. One moment, he saw himself as a god, the next. As a comic panel, then as a memory, then as a mathematical abstraction. All layers of his identity peeled away like skin, revealing a skeleton of ideas, and still he held together. Manhattan reconstructed himself on the back of causality's final thread. He created an artificial source code for his being and rewrote his essence as a recursive loop. He would now exist so long as the question, what is, remained unanswered. It was brilliant, but it was not enough. The Beyonder watched him with admiration and pity. You cling to identity, John, but I abandoned mine before your fiction was born. You want to become the question? I already am. The answer, Dr. Manhattan rose from the wreckage of everything, surrounded by thoughts that had no thinkers, by universes that no longer had timelines. Even you are bound by something. He said, no being is above consequence. You misunderstand, the Beyonder said. I am not above consequence. I am the field in which consequence exists. I am not a being. I am what being is made of. And then he did something that no one expected, not even the omniscient Dr. Manhattan. He grew quiet. He did not strike. Instead, he let John see. The Beyonder allowed Manhattan a glimpse not of power, but of truth. A single fraction of his total understanding poured into Manhattan's quantum soul. And in that moment, the Watchman God saw it. He saw the limit of omniscience. He saw that his vision of all time was not absolute, that it was constructed by a framework, a dimension, a narrative ecosystem built by others, while the Beyonder observed from outside it all, untouched by its rules. Dr. Manhattan faltered. I thought I was beyond. You are beyond your world, Beyonder said gently. But I am beyond worlds. Manhattan's body dimmed. His glow faded, not extinguished by violence, but by realization. The being he had confronted could not be unmade, could not be reasoned into submission, could not be outthought. Because the Beyonder wasn't playing the same game. In fact, it was the table the game was played on, and with that, the Beyonder extended his hand not to kill, not to conquer, but to close the page, reality side. Dr. Manhattan collapsed into a noble thought, a profound one, but no longer central. He did not die. He simply returned to his fiction, diminished, wiser, and aware now that he was not the ultimate observer, but one of many dreams, dreamt by something greater. And the Beyonder, he turned and left. There was nothing left to prove. Victory did not roar. It whispered, a quiet, terrible truth, that even gods have ceilings. And the Beyonder had never seen one.